The veil wasn't about modesty, it was about hiding evidence. Evidence of what had been done to you in that chamber. Evidence that would make your husband ask questions the system didn't want answered. You couldn't speak about it. That was illegal. Physical evidence was hidden. That was tradition. And if you showed fear, trauma, distress, well, that was expected. You were a virgin, after all. Of course you were scared. The machinery of silence was perfect, flawless, cruel beyond measure, until 186 BCE, when everything almost broke. A woman named Hispala Facenia did something impossible. She went before the Roman consul and testified about the Bacchanalia, secret religious rites operating in Rome for decades. Her testimony described systematic abuse disguised as sacred ritual. Young people taken into underground chambers, violated by priests, silenced by religious law. The Senate was horrified. They launched investigations, arrested priests, executed leaders, shut down the Bacchanalia completely. And during that investigation, emboldened by Hispala's courage, several women tried to testify about the marriage purification ritual. The Senate refused to hear them. According to the historian Livy, Consul Spurius Postumius declared, "The Bacchanalia are foreign corruptions, but the rites of Bonadea are Roman tradition. We do not investigate tradition." That's how abuse endures. By calling itself tradition. By claiming age equals legitimacy. The women who tried to testify were warned to stay silent or face impiety charges themselves, but one woman refused. Her name wasn't recorded in official histories. They erased her deliberately. But we know what she did. She stood in the Roman Forum, the heart of the empire's power, and publicly described what happened in the chamber beneath the temple. She was arrested within hours, charged with impiety and public obscenity, exiled to Sicily, forbidden from ever speaking to Roman citizens again. She vanished from history. But something survived. A graffiti inscription discovered in 1964 near the Roman Forum. It dates to approximately 180 BCE, just 6 years after the Bacchanalia scandal. It reads in rough Latin, "Tradition is what monsters call their crimes when no one stops them." Someone carved that into stone at the very heart of Rome's power. Someone risked everything, their freedom, their life, to leave that message, hoping someone someday would read it and understand. Now let me tell you what Rome in all its power could not fully erase. The ritual continued for centuries, but it began to change. By 100 BCE, wealthy Roman families found a solution, a loophole in the system's cruel design. Instead of forcing their daughters to undergo the ritual with the priests in the hidden chambers, they paid vast bribes for a symbolic purification, a ceremony without the chamber, without the assault. It was religion, they argued, performed properly, simply by different means. The priests accepted those bribes. Of course they did, because it was never truly about religion. It was always fundamentally about power. Once wealthy families could purchase exemption, the practice for what it truly was became brutally exposed. It was a system crafted to allow powerful men to violate vulnerable women with legal immunity. Nothing more, nothing sacred. By 100 CE, the practice had largely ended among elite families, but it persisted among the lower classes for another century precisely because they could not afford the astronomical bribes. The historian Juvenal, writing around 100 CE, mentions it with bitter irony. The poor still offer their daughters to the old gods, the rich offer gold instead. The system didn't end because of morality or justice or any sudden recognition that it was inherently wrong. It ended because wealthy men finally decided they didn't want it happening to their daughters. As long as it happened to someone else's daughters, it was tradition, untouchable, immutable. The moment it threatened elite families, it became negotiable. That tells you everything about who the system was truly built to protect. Here's what modern historians are finally beginning to admit after centuries of denial. For generations, classical scholars dismissed or minimized these accounts. They called the evidence fragmentary. They claimed the sources were unreliable. They argued the entire matter was likely exaggerated. They did everything except actually investigate what occurred with an open mind. Why? Because acknowledging this practice means admitting that Rome, the very foundation of Western law, the supposed model of civilization, embedded systematic abuse into its most sacred rituals. It means accepting that Roman marriage was not a contract between equals. It was a transaction that included state-sanctioned assault as an explicit part of the legal process. It means recognizing that when we celebrate Roman law and Roman civilization, we are honoring a culture that actively protected perpetrators and ruthlessly silenced victims for centuries. That is deeply uncomfortable. So historians for too long looked away. But in the last 2 decades, new archaeological evidence and new analytical frameworks have made denial impossible. The chambers are real. The inscriptions are real. The legal texts are real. The women's names etched in stone are real. We can no longer turn away. In 2018, a team from the American Academy in Rome released a comprehensive study examining all available evidence surrounding the ritual. Their conclusion states in no uncertain terms, the evidence strongly indicates that premarital religious purification rituals in Roman society involved assault of brides by religious authorities, systematized through legal and social structures that prevented resistance or accountability. That is academic language for, this happened. It was systematic. It was protected by law. It was evil. But here's what gives me hope within this terrible history. The people who resisted, the woman who stood in the forum and spoke the truth, knowing it would ruin her, the artist who painted the hidden fresco, hoping it would endure, the person who carved defiant graffiti into stone at the very center of Roman power, the families who found alternatives, who paid bribes, who broke tradition because they loved their daughters more than they feared the gods. These people could not stop the machine entirely, but they recorded it. They left proof. They refused to let it vanish completely into the darkness. And 2,000 years later, we are finding their messages. We are reading their warnings. We are hearing their resistance. That matters because here's the profound lesson Rome tried to bury. Systems of abuse do not collapse simply because everyone suddenly realizes they are wrong. They collapse because enough people refuse to participate, because enough people document the truth, because enough people decide that tradition does not excuse cruelty. When enough people withdraw their participation, even the most deeply rooted systems can collapse. That is not just ancient history. That is a blueprint for our present. Stand in Rome today. Visit the Temple of Bona Dea on the Aventine Hill. It lies in ruins now, only broken columns and scattered stone. But if you go beneath, if you locate the entrance to the excavated chamber, you can still see the names on the walls. Hundreds of names. Julia, Cornelia, Flavia, Fulvia, women whose fathers brought them here, women who endured the ritual, women who were forbidden to speak of it, but they carved their names into stone anyway. Not defiance, perhaps. Not open rebellion. Just this. I existed. I was here. This happened to me. That was all they could do. Leave their names. Hope someone someday would find them and understand. We found them. We understand. And we refuse to allow Rome's sanitized version of history to be the only one. Here's my final question for you. How many other rituals like this existed across ancient civilizations? How many other practices we labeled tradition were actually systematic abuse disguised as religion? How many names are still carved into hidden chambers, waiting for someone to find them and speak the truth the victims were never allowed to say? The names are still on the walls, waiting for justice, waiting for recognition, waiting for someone to finally say, this was wrong. This should never have happened. And we will remember you. If you want more untold stories from medieval history, stories that textbooks are too afraid to tell, subscribe to Medieval Survival right now. Hit that notification bell because next time I'm revealing another ritual that civilization tried to bury, another truth that powerful systems wanted erased. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. The names outlived Rome's empire. The testimony outlasted Rome's laws. The resistance survived 2,000 years of silence. We hear you.